My name is Dawn and my wife's name is Carla. We have been married for 8.5 years and have an 8-year-old son, Steve, and a 4-year-old daughter, Lori. Carla was pregnant when we got married and Steve arrived 6 months after the wedding. None of our friends or family really cared that much about the fact that we had to get married except for Carla's mother and father. They were of course very disappointed in their daughter, but made sure that everyone knew the real blame was mine. I was the that got her pregnant, and am the lowlife who destroyed all of her opportunities. I have never measured up to the man they wanted to marry their daughter, and I never would. They think she had to settle for me. It made me feel awful. Of course, I did do exactly what they say I did. I did convince her and I did take her virginity. That is all true. As far as I am concerned, her parents can just stuff it with all that blame talk. I love their daughter more than they could hope for from any man, and she knows it, but her mother and father will never realize that. They cannot get past her getting pregnant. Nothing I have done, or ever could do, will bring them around. I will be the bad guy until they die. Carla and I met when she was a senior in high school in Chicago Heights, and I was in my second year of college at the University of Illinois at Champaign. I knew she was the one for me the moment I met her. We became a couple very soon into our relationship and just seemed to connect. I took her virginity about 1 month after we started going together, and we would make love almost every time we got together after that. Once Carla graduated from high school, she lived at home with her mother and father and worked at a Chase Manhattan bank as a teller. I saw her almost every weekend, either in Chicago Heights or in Oak Lawn where my parents lived. I had 1 year to go in college when I found out she was 2 months pregnant. We planned the wedding for as soon as possible. Got married in November, and as I said, Steve arrived 6 months later in May. I got my degree 2 weeks after Steve was born and took a job in airport security at O'Hare Airport. Carla had continued to live with her mother and father until I graduated and got my job. We had our apartment all set in Des Plaines and moved in the weekend after I graduated. It was wonderful to finally be together as a family. For the next 8 years things were wonderful. The jobs got better. We bought a house. Steve was growing like a weed. Our marital life was great. Lori came along and both of the kids grew like weeds. We were happy. There were more promotions, more money, and more happiness. But I suppose I should get on with the reason I am writing this story. All that happiness was going to change. In fact, I went through a number of very unhappy months in my life. My wife and I had been having a little bit of a battle about who is keeping whom from getting enough sleep. I tell her that she snores and wakes me up, and she says the same thing about me. She will not believe that she snores at all, but she has the most unnerving squeaky little snore that never fails to wake me up, and once that happens I listen to her squeak for an hour before she stops and I can go back to sleep. I know I probably do snore because I catch myself doing it once in a while. And I suppose she does lose sleep too, but it is this bad guy thing all over again. It frustrates me that she thinks it is only my fault. It just rubs me the wrong way. I take enough of that shit from her parents that I don't feel I should have to take it from her too. To help solve the problem, I brought home a voice-activated recorder from work and set it up on the nightstand next to our bed. I laughed and told Carla that we would just see who snores and who doesn't. The next morning we both woke up at the same time, and after a good morning kiss we rewound the tape and listened. Sure enough, there was my chainsaw snoring as loud as you please, and she pointed a finger at me and said, "See what I have to put up with." Of course, it didn't take too long before you could distinctly hear the squeak, squeak, squeak of her snoring too in the lulls between my chainsaw. Carla gasped and looked at me with such a shocked look that I just had to laugh. She said, "Oh my gosh, I am awful." With that we both burst out laughing, and she said, "Honey, we both have to work on this so we don't drive each other out of the bedroom." I agreed. Yes, you certainly do need to work on that squeak. I was just glad to not be the bad guy all by myself again. She whacked me on the arm and said, "Honey, I am sorry I laid all the blame on you. I can see now that we are equally guilty." I pulled her to me and we had a very warm and loving kiss, hug, and of course I copped a number of rather intimate feels. But she didn't complain. By the time that we finished, the kids were both awake and we both ended up being late for work. Update. Do you all know what happened next? Let's see an update. The recorder was forgotten. A couple of days go by. She asks me to come home early to stay with the kids because she has a meeting at the bank. I notice the recorder. I grin to myself about my proof that she snores. I just have to hear it again, so I rewind and play the tape. I listen to us the next morning and get all turned on listening to us make love. I heard next. She betrayed me in our marital bed. She played another man in our bed. Not much else to say. As soon as I knew what was on the tape, I called our neighbor Judy and asked her if she would mind watching the kids for a while because I had a big work project I needed to concentrate on. She had nothing going on, so she said she would be happy to do that for me. I walked them over and told them to be good for Judy. and then I would come get them when I had dinner ready. They were more than happy to stay by Judy and play with her two kids who were almost identical in age. When I got back upstairs in the bedroom, I resumed listening to the tape. Oh my God, Steve, it has been too long again since you played me. I have missed it so much these last couple of months. Well, never fear, my sweet. I am going to play you this afternoon. Well, I really want you to get me pregnant again today. Dawn and I want to have another baby. I would sure like all three of my babies to have the same daddy. Hasn't Dawn ever been suspicious about us? Doesn't he ever question why the kids don't look at all like him? Is he stupid or what? Don't say that about Dawn. He is not stupid. I have never given him any reason to believe that I wasn't faithful to him. He laughed. Well, I still don't understand how you could slip the kids past him. Fortunately, Stevie Jr. and Laurie both look exactly like me, so there is no reason he would be suspicious about that. I heard her laugh at that Stevie Jr. crack and it just broke my heart. Well, maybe today I will give you a kid that looks like me and blow your cover. Then he will divorce you and you can marry me. Stop talking about all this, Steve. I love Don very much and don't want to see him hurt. What you and I have is just pure hot play and I love it, but that is all there ever will be between us. The rest of the tape was as you would expect. There were all the grunts, groans, mewing and exclamations of a man and woman in the throes of sexual passion. I don't have to describe it to you and won't. It is too painful for me to even think of it anymore. I listened to the whole thing. My whole marriage was a lie. The love, trust and closeness I thought we had were non-existent. There was no love or fidelity on her part. How could she love me and do what she had been doing? She couldn't. How could she have given 100% of herself to our marriage? I felt when I heard all there was to hear on that tape. I was hurt to my core. I was physically ill. I could hear my heartbeat and I prayed it would keep going. I was disgusted. I was emasculated. I was terrified. I was livid. I can't go on. There are just too many words to describe what I was. Devastated comes to mind also. Yes, I was devastated. That word seems to say most of it. I was not a stupid man, so I knew that I would have to figure out what I was going to do. What would become of me and my family, my life? The first thing I knew I had to do was to secure a copy of the tape to keep. I was certain that in some way I would need it. The recorder had a 2-tape system, so I set it up to copy from tape 1 onto tape 2 and made my copy. That copy I put into a manila envelope and took it out to the trunk of my car. No matter what happened in the next few minutes, I knew I had that tape for proof. Secondly, I knew I needed to keep my knowledge a secret for a while, at least until I had things figured out. I rewound the tape to the end of our snoring demonstration and erased the rest. Then I set the recorder back on the nightstand and left the bedroom. If Carla thought about it, light bulbs might go on in her head and she might just listen to the tape to see if it recorded her and Steve. She would not hear anything and would not be alerted to the fact that I knew her dirty little secret. I knew that I needed all of the facts to determine what I would do. I figured a good starting point would be back when I met Carla and move forward from there. I had met her through a friend of hers from school that was dating my cousin. I knew that the best source of information would be her high school yearbooks. I went down into the basement and rummaged through things until I found the box that contained all of our high school yearbooks, and I took all of both of our yearbooks and put them in the trunk of my car. I put the boxes back exactly as they had been to not raise any suspicions. I figured if she somehow discovered they were missing, I could always say that they must be in a different box somewhere. Lastly, I knew that if I saw Carla tonight, she would know that something was dreadfully wrong, so I called my boss for help. Jim and I had become very good friends over the years I had worked with him, and I knew I could trust him. I told him what I had discovered and asked him to cover for me for a few days so I could get to the bottom of it all and make my final decision. I asked him to arrange a trip for me to go to New York for a few days to an anti-terrorism school. That would be consistent with courses I had taken in the past and would never raise any suspicions. Of course I would not go. I had places to go, people to see, and a life of lies to uncover. Jim agreed to help me with the cover story that this class came up at the last minute, and that it was something that I absolutely needed to do. I needed to be on a plane in an hour. I called Carla on her cell phone and explained the urgent trip that Jim had called to send me on. I told her that I would take the kids over for Judy to watch, and I would pack and be on my way to the airport in a matter of minutes. I told her I didn't even know all the details yet for the class, but then I would call her and let her know after I found out. Needless to say, she wasn't happy with the spur-of-the-moment departure, but I told her there was nothing I could do about it and said goodbye. I heard her say "I love you, Dawn" as I hung up, but she didn't hear it back from me. I then walked over to Judy's and explained to her that I had to make an urgent trip out of town and that Carla would be home in about an hour to pick up the kids if that was okay with her. She said it was okay with her. I asked to take the Steve and Laurie home with me while I packed so I could say goodbye to them, and then I would bring them back when I was ready to leave. That too was okay with her, so away we went. I needed to get the kids' DNA samples before I left. I managed to take a Q-tip swabs and got saliva samples from both Steve and Lori. I knew I could get their DNA analyzed and compared to my DNA samples to prove that I was not their biological father. The results of those tests would be bad news for me, but I guess I already knew the bad news from Carla's confession on the tape. I finished packing enough clothes for a few days and left the house with the kids. I took them to Judy and thanked her again for taking care of the kids for the next hour on such short notice. I left and drove to a hotel in Harvey, another Chicago South Side suburb. It was far enough away from Chicago Heights that I knew I wouldn't run into any of Carla's family, but close enough to use as a base of operations to do my investigation. After I checked into the hotel, I picked up some beer and got drunk. It seemed the only logical thing to do. Why lay awake feeling the pain and hurt? Why live it over and over again in my mind all night while trying to sleep? Just get drunk and pass out. I knew I would feel like hell tomorrow, but that was going to happen anyway. So I just got drunk. When I woke up, I did feel like shit. It was after 11 a.m., and I thought I would surely be dead before noon. My head was throbbing and my stomach was churning, so I did the only logical thing. I had a couple of more beers. It probably was the best thing I could have done, because the next time I woke up it was 3 p.m. and I actually felt a little better. This time I called room service and ordered some coffee and some toast, which arrived a short time later. While I waited, I showered and got myself dressed in some clean clothes. The coffee hit the spot and I was able to get the toast down and keep it all down. Now what was I going to do with the rest of the day? I checked my cell phone for messages and there were 3 of them. The first was from Carla from the previous night. She was upset that I had not called her when I arrived in New York, and she was upset that she couldn't get in touch with me because she didn't know where I was staying. She told me to call her as soon as I got her message. The second call was also from Carla, but it was from earlier this morning. She was really pissed at me now because I hadn't called her either last night or earlier this morning. She was clearly irritated with me, but I didn't care. I would give her a big excuse when I actually did talk to her. I knew I had to talk to her soon, but I would delay it a bit longer. Hell, she was already pissed. How much more pissed could she get? I actually laughed at that stupidity. The third call was from Jim. It came just a few minutes after Carla had called. He told me that she demanded to know where I was and what was going on. He told me that I owed him big time for all the shit she gave him, and I agreed. He told her that he didn't know what hotel I would be able to get into, so he had no more information than she had as to where I was. He also told her that the seminar would be held at a conference center at JFK Airport, and that she could try to get in touch with me there. Well, you know the bureaucracy of airport security. She would try until hell freezes over and never be able to locate me even if I was there. Not being there, of course, it would be even more impossible, so I was safe until I called her. I figured I had a couple of hours to work on my project before she got home from work, so I sat down with my laptop and started on my checklist. I listed everything that I already knew. I listed details I needed filled in. I went through her yearbook and listed every person who had written anything in her junior or senior yearbooks and cross-referenced them by class year. I called her high school and asked them if they had a reunion book for her 5-year reunion. The administrative assistant was very helpful and told me they had the 5-year book, but would I like a copy of the 10-year one, which would be coming up very soon. I told her I did, and I asked if it was available electronically, and it was, so I gave her my email address and asked that she email it to me. 5 minutes later I had the list and started putting the names from the yearbook together with married names, spouses, addresses, and telephone numbers. Man, talk about a wealth of information. I had the most current list I could have hoped for, and I even knew the names of children, pets, hobbies, favorite foods, etc. for all of Carla's classmates. I even discovered that Carla had sent in the current information for us and listed our 2 children with a footnote saying, "Hopefully number 3 will be on the way soon." By this time I was sure Carla would be home from work, so I decided to brave the phone call to her and endure her wrath for a few minutes. I had to get it over with sooner or later. Have you noted the cynicism in my writings of late? I would suspect you did. It was because there was no longer any concern for her feelings. She was at fault for how I felt, and I was not going to worry if my sarcasm showed through a little bit. She would have to just live with it. I called her. "Dawn, where the hell have you been? Why didn't you return my call last night or this morning? What the hell is going on anyway?" I wasn't taken aback in the least. I knew she would rail on me, so I let her get it out of her system before I responded. I told her that when I arrived it was very late, and I didn't want to call that late to wake up the kids. I also said that I was feeling sorry for myself, so I just got kind of drunk, and by the time I got up it was too late to call this morning. I had to rush to get